Okay, so just to say welcome to everybody to navigate, but also a massive thank you to the newly born granny, Sarah Coral, and just for all your, really, Sarah, all your time and your effort. Sitting here thousands of kilometers away in Australia, coming from a long lost war in a country that no longer exists to experience the generosity of everything you've done to support my vision. Really, it just means a lot. That's a real gift. And, just listening to Kyle speaking prior to this, just that power of the story and the power of allowing us to be part of a tribe, it just makes a huge difference. My tribe, we bombshelled out in the 70s after our war, and it was the kind of overlay of the Vietnam era. And of course, we transitioned into nothing. We didn't even have an understanding of where we came from or its impact on us at all. We just blasted into life. I was 3 weeks out of fighting, and I mean, I was working in four-man sticks deep in the bush, which was our standard protocol where terrorists worked in 13 to 300. So they were big groups. And we just bombshelled out of that. 2 or 3 weeks later, I was back at uni, waking up 30 times out a night, headaches, body aches and pains, and not really even knowing what that was about. I don't even remember connecting that to not so much PTS, but more the impacts of the war. And then the rest that follows. And I think that the gift was I always wondered why I became a teacher because I really was not a good student. I had a few learning issues and hated school. Falling into psychology was by default. And it was only at the end of all of that and three or four immigrations across the world that I found myself back in a school as a psychologist, having been the first bunch in Australia to be selected to be a contractor for our veteran organization. And I saw the pattern of the 70s to the present of everything I did and the randomness of it just come together. And when you talk about, as we did just now, that bigger story that guides all of us forward and gives us hope and faith, it's when I look back, I realized there was a dance, an amazing dance. And over the 22 years of sitting with veterans, the first few years I thought I was fine because our generation did think we were fine. We didn't really realize we were carrying impacts. But then as I was listening to the stories, I realized that I was still on a journey. I was still on a transitioning journey. I was still on a healing journey. And a lot of it I really hadn't thought about. Um, and I saw that when I looked back in my transitioning process, the only way I could find peace was through running. And so my 10Ks became 20Ks, became marathons, and ultimately became ultra marathons. But the thing was, I wasn't just running, I was running away from. And what I was running away from was needing to be dealt with. And so sitting with people as we shared stories around transitioning and around their difficulties in terms of the moral injuries they experience from within their organizations, as well as the challenges in finding identity, purpose, meaning, tribe, and healing the aspects of themselves that were embedded with grief or not feeling good enough, I realized that I was self-reflecting and growing with these people and these extraordinary individuals I was sitting with. And after many years, what started to change was I learned to find a language in the journey of leaving and arriving that was embedded solely within operational terminology. And so my journeys began to evolve in many ways. And I started to, when I sat with people and listened to them, I'd say to them, when you think about the men you operated with, or even the women you operated with, would you leave someone behind? And they went, absolutely not. And then my next question would be, so on this journey of leaving the military, why have you left yourself behind? And that moment I could see an awakening because I'd linked into a core value, not to core, a core value, which is you never ever leave someone behind. It is just, even if your life is at risk, you go back and you bring someone, whether they're dead or alive. And the minute I replicated that purpose and that value in the present moment back on the person, they realized that they had a mission. And the mission wasn't just for themselves, that mission was for others around them as well. So there was mission to go back and rescue yourself. And there was purpose in that you have a story to share. You have a journey that can also help others come out of this confusing territory of trying to reclaim yourself. From that slowly emerged all the tools. And from understanding tools that came from operational terminology, and the core tool always was transitioning for all of us. It doesn't matter whether we are military or first responders. Transitioning is a complex process. We transition as we age. We transition as marriage fails. We transition as we move. We transition with the birth of a child. We transition with loss. We transition even in terms of how our bodies change as we age and our capabilities change. And transition is something that faces us. It will not go away. And we either find a way to talk to transitioning, or transitioning talks to us. And I think when it comes this way, it's not easy if we do not pay attention in the very beginning. And so when I started talking to veterans about the core concept is always the pull through, is the learning to look after your weapon. And, we can equate that weapon to who we are, our bodies, our spirits, our souls, our emotions. And that the core thing anybody knows, whether you're a first responder or a veteran, is that you clean your weapon. And when we started to look at the tools of cleaning their weapon, the thing that we started to identify is, what are you willing to do to keep yourself, your weapon clean, your barrel clean, as you are transitioning and rescuing yourself? And we understood and we understand that when you do not work with yourself, there's a residue from the stresses of the world and the challenges of life that starts to accumulate in our bodies. And I'm very much, and I mean, Patrick, I know talking to you, I'm very much based on the body based rather than cognition based. The things that live in our body are the things that are real. Cognition is a story we can create many things out of. And unfortunately, a lot of therapies stay within the cognitive area. And the story I always hear is, we understand, but we haven't changed. It's in the body where we need to go. And so if the body is equated to the barrel of a weapon, it's when you don't clean that part of yourself, there are three things that are going to happen. You will start to lose control of your emotional journey, of the challenges of your environment. And you can start to become extremely angry and irritable and reactive. And that's what I call an accidental discharge, or an AD. Or we start to really shut down with anxiety and depression. And that's what I call a stoppage, which is when the round gets caught in the barrel of a weapon. Or you lose it. You've left it for too long and you're now out of control in every way. And that's what I call a runaway gun, when a weapon starts firing on its own volition. So creating a framework on the transitioning process to help people map out their journey and find a way of orientating their compass to that journey has made a huge difference in terms of how people transition. It gives them a meaning, it gives them a framework, and generally, within probably the first time of sitting with someone, they go away with some pull-throughs. It could be making your bed every day. But I always say, in any change we're facing, the minute we start to do something, we're back in control. So this kind of found its form in the book that I wrote, which is really something that I wanted to leave behind when I was no longer around, that became a process that people could rewrite their story in the book using the tools that I've learned. And they're not just my tools. These are things that have emerged over 22 years of these extraordinary people that I've sat with. And so the goal was to kind of create a transitioning process that made sense to first responders. It made sense to veterans, but it would also help the partners and the families of veterans and first responders to understand these extraordinary people that they are connected to, and also give them ways to understand and have a language to communicate with them. And the other goal that's really important to me in the transitioning process is to equip allied health professionals with a way of finding a language that works. So you step away from your certificates on the wall, you step away from your set modalities. So it's no longer the client or the patient, and I'm not sure I go for those two words too well, but it's not them who walks into your room, it's you walk into their territory, and you have a responsibility to understand the language of that territory, and you have a responsibility to enter it and journey with them, rather than you come into my room, these are the modalities I use, and we will do that. It's a top-down approach versus a bottom-up approach. So I think, again, to say thank you for an opportunity to actually sit down and begin a conversation around transitioning. It's not just about the book. So whether people read the book or don't read the book, that's fine. I'd love to start slowly and build a community of people that start to share stories. And I think from what Kyle said previously, that sharing of stories is a network which leaves people never alone in the darkest times of their journeys, because once you're embedded in the stories of a tribe, you are never alone. And when those stories of the tribe are not just the stories of the journeys people have made in terms of refinding and rescue themselves, but they're also stories that involve faith, whatever that might be. So you're embedded in the physical tribe, and you're embedded in a connection that's bigger than tribe. And I think when we can do that, we're going to have less than, who said to me the other day, 44 people a day are choosing not to live. It's not 22 anymore. And that was deeply concerning. So that's the vision and the quest of and my mission of this kind of a gathering. But I'm going to stop there, and I'd just love to hear about your experiences of transitioning, because I think part of what I feel is important, that it's not a top-down, me just splurring through my book and going page by page. If people are reading the book, it's grist for the mill, but I'd love to have an experience where we start to talk about these stories, where they are stories of other people transitioning or our own transitioning. And in doing that, we connect and form a place where we are safe in this journey where it's so easy to get lost. So, Patrick, I know I've heard, I'm going to grab you, because I know when you were talking, I mean, you just opened my heart, and I think I was probably close to tears. It was so deeply moving. So your thoughts on this whole process of transitioning?
Wow. I do wish we were closer to one another. So I say this a lot, so we could actually have this conversation over a meal or something. Um, Transitioning is hard. I think that one thing that you speak to very well, and you mentioned briefly here, is um, I have behind me all these medals and badges and pictures on my wall, and you mentioned that. And part of transitioning is being able to leave those in the rearview mirror, but keep looking forward, and that's hard. You know that for me, a big part of my story was learning to, and I had to be stripped of it to abandon my personal pride. And it's hard to understand how damaging and caustic pride can be, because it seems so natural and it seems like a good thing. Pride in my country, my job, my family. And I think that appropriately placed, it can be good. However, um, pride can also be something that is malaligned, and that leads you astray. And for me, it has been on several occasions. So for me, the best part about transitioning, and the part that, as I speak to people myself, is learning to set that aside and having the courage to try new things. With what you've been through and what I've been through, and a lot of people, what is ahead of us is nowhere near as difficult as the mud that we've trudged through to get here. And yet it's scarier than that. in part because when we're young, we jump into that mud willingly and think it's going to be fun. Um, so I don't know that I said anything of value, but for me, and reflecting on your book, we said this a little bit before the recording started. I like the fact that you provide in warrior language actionable steps and relatable stories and anecdotes that help people. And I think that that is what we all need. We just need other people who've been there to kind of light the path in front of us, because otherwise we don't know which path we're on.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. I mean, your words are always just incredibly moving, and I think I always say it to all of us, and I think regardless of where we come from, when we scratch away everything, all that's left is grief. And I think that's the thing that binds all of us, whether we've been to war or not, whether we've lived our lives and struggles, there's grief. And I think when we acknowledge that, in grief we connect, in grief we open our hearts, and I think in grief we remember. And I'm hoping that as we gather, this acknowledgement that in our hearts lives something that connects us all, and there is a level of story that as we begin to share it, we find hope and we re-find who we are. Because, as I said, too many people are getting lost, and that worries me so deeply in this age. But thanks, Patrick. Robin or Sarah, I don't know if anything's coming up for you guys that you may want to share, but there's no pressure at all.
I'm just really enjoying the conversation. I love what you said about going into the warrior's journey versus expecting them to come into your modality.
Yeah,
Yeah, that you really are walking aside with the person who wants to heal, who's really stepping out on courage to heal. And I just appreciate the sensitivity and the education, but the sensitivity to really thoughtfully help a person move forward. And plus, you do have the language because you have been there yourself. So there's just so much I appreciate about it, and I appreciate being here so I can learn more how to support our protectors. Thank you.
yeah, yeah. It's this journey of refinding ourselves and going on a rescue mission. It's a bit like I always remember the time in 1972, 72, yeah, it was first year university. And I remember turning on a little black and white television and seeing this marathon called Comrades Ultra Marathon. It was an uphill 84-kilometer race in South Africa. And in those days, there was kilometers between the people. And I remember looking at this and going, this is absolutely insane. Who in God's name would want to do this? And then in 1990, I made a commitment. I'd run a whole lot of marathons around the world, and I made a commitment that I wanted to do that. And I was in South Africa at the time. And a friend of mine said, "Look, I'll mentor you, but there's a deal here, is that you don't give up." And I went, "Of course, I'm not going to give up." And he gave me a training program, and my training runs were like 40 Ks. I'd just head out and I'd run for the day. And I ran an ultra, my first ultra before that, which was 64 Ks, divided half down, half up, and I flew that. I mean, it was effortless, and I was on such a high, but I learned nothing because it was easy. And this race, all my ghosts came up. I always say when I run, I talk to ancestors, and every ancestor over several thousand lives came up and screamed at me. I had doubts, I had fear, I was scared. I mean, I couldn't. He said to me, "Do you see in the far distance those clouds?" I went, "Yep." He said, "That's not even halfway." And I just had this thing in my stomach on this journey that I was about to begin. And at 68 Ks, my iliotibial, the muscle, it went. And all I wanted to do was die. I wished a car would knock me over because I wasn't going to give up. And I thumped my way to the end of the race and finished it. And I've always said that has been the most powerful lesson, because it's the same as transitioning. One, you need to have a commitment. And that's where in the book I started with the warrior acronym. And the whole commitment is, what is your will? You know, that first W, that will to actually do what you need to do, which is go back and rescue yourself and move forward. And I know, and I learned from running, that it's very easy to say absolutely, but that will is only tested in the fire of adversity. It's like, what is faith? Faith is the easiest thing to have when things are going well. But what is your faith like when your marriage has fallen apart, you're homeless, you're on the streets, you're down and out? God feels like the worst enemy you've ever come across. That is the most powerful time when our relationship with something bigger with ourselves starts to become present. And so the core thing in transitioning is, when you go back and rescue yourself, understand that this is not an easy journey. It can't be a fluffy thing. In that journey, you will face the deepest and hardest parts of yourself, and the pain and the loss and the grief and the anger and the resentment and the moral injuries, and trying to redefine who you are, find purpose, and heal the turbulence you may have caused around you as you blasted forward. But you must be willing to face that. You must be willing to every day do something that keeps you in the front seat of the car. Even, as I said, if it's as simple as making your bed. But the core thing with transitioning, it's not something that we can just sit and talk about and learn or read books. It's only found in the fires of the journey, in that going back to get yourself. And I think, childhood traumas, marriages that have fallen apart, loss of children. We've heard people talk about losing their child. How do you reclaim yourself from that? And generally the answer is through the fires of your grief, through the forming of whatever faith you believe in. So there's something bigger, and through the attachment and the forming of tribe around you. That's a circle that walks with you as you go back into your heart, into your loss, into your grief. And we are surrounded by people that hold us and carry us forward. And that's the vision, is always, if we can, the more we have these groups focusing on specific areas, where in tribe we hold each other and we walk with each other. And even when we're not together, internally, we exist within each other. And we know that in the darkest moments of our night, we know we have these people within us who walk with us. And so I think my first message on something on our first meeting is that this is not an easy process. It is not a fluffy process. It's a process that can take us to the edges of our sadness and our loss and our despair at times. But when we can learn to have conversations and share stories, when we can learn to become visible to each other and know there's a place where we belong, in that time and in that place, we have the potential to keep moving forward and bring the best of who we are and the wisdom that we gather to our lives that lie ahead of us. And I want to say again, Sarah, that the tribe that you have formed is a place of belonging that saves lives. It's not just a place where we gather. It's a place that actually saves lives. And as we save lives, there's lives that are born and move on. It's generations that we save. And it's something really powerful you are doing. And again, I'll keep saying thank you for allowing me the opportunity to sit and slowly learn to talk about the book, or slowly learn for all of us to have conversations where we can heal and return with these beautiful parts of who we are. I don't know if anything's, I want to keep checking in, because me talking too much is not something that I sit too comfortably with. So again, just what's coming up and what's coming up for people. Okay, Patrick, all yours.
um, your language that you use is almost poetic. And as you speak about the forming of a tribe and how your tribe accompanies you on the journey, and that is phrased in a way that I've never heard it used. And I will definitely give you the credit, but that is something that I will use as I help people on their journey. Because so often you feel like you're alone, and within arm's reach is that usually 500-pound phone
Yeah.
that's so difficult to pick up and
Yeah.
call somebody who does care about you. And we often stop, and I think we create our own destruction in that, where we say, oh, he didn't answer, so he doesn't care, and we don't move on to the next number in the phone. And teaching people to be persistent and resilient in that, and to keep pushing through and calling until they find somebody. There's really no excuse these days. We have so many mechanisms where, look, we're talking to you across the world, and
Mm.
in real time without delay for once. But I, I think that your language that you use, and this video later, will be something that I can use to help other people. So I'm grateful.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. In my transitioning journey, I went through 5 continents, starting again, starting again, several relationships, some of which ended up in some interesting situations, and just loss after loss, but also gift after gift. And the echo of this was on so much loss and grief. And this year has been a challenging one, coming to terms with it. But I realized that in my transitioning journey, everything I love is an attachment, and it's an extraordinary attachment. But we are put on this planet for a really limited period of time. And, hitting 70 this year, I had to really face that my sands in my time clock were running out. Whether I liked it or not, I could be as fit and as well as I choose to be. But when I look at that clock, when I look at that little sand thing, I can see there's that much left versus, somebody's in their 30s or 20s and the sand is very full. And I started to really reflect on what was important. And I was saying to my wife the other day, I'm so grateful for the fact that I have one person I'm deeply committed to and journey with. I'm grateful that I've got a roof over my head that is safe, that I have work that keeps me nurtured and on track. And it's so simple. And that even where life removes powerful attachments from me, that I can grieve, but I can still have purpose and mission and a sense of belonging and a sense of love around me. Life's going to face us with extraordinary losses. I mean, the very fact that, even in couples, somebody's going to go first. And I've never had to think about this until my chronology now. And that's why part of the transitioning, I always used to say that when I was running, I felt superhuman. There was never an issue. If I was struggling with grief or loss or change, I'd go for a run. Now I realize that I can't run away from everything. I can't, because my body will no longer allow me to do it. My body won't let me go and run, and my body won't let me run anymore. And so what happens when you can't run? I often say to the guys I'm working with is you can jump out of planes, you can do crazy stuff, but remember there's a pack of wolves and they follow about 30 meters behind you. It's the pain of your past, and they're silent and they run silently and they never catch up to you. As long as you're running, they stay 30 meters behind you because they know that a time will come in your life where you're going to have to stop. And if you haven't done the work, when you stop, watch out. And that's why it's while you can still run, while you can still walk, and while you can still crawl, you need to do the work of healing. Because when you stop, they sit in a circle around you, and now you have to start to deal with it. And they sit silently around you. They're the witnesses that will face you with everything you've chosen not to face. And we know that many of us go into extreme stuff because the dopamine hit, the adrenaline, we heal. But it's healing in inverted commas. You don't heal the heart. You don't heal the pain. You don't heal the loss or the grief. And we have to be ready for that moment when those wolves sit around us. And, am I ready? I don't think I'm ready. I still think that there's a lot that I've run away from. And, that's 47 years down the line. And if I know that I'm still good at doing that, I know that people that are just beginning it are also going to be good at doing it. And it's the wisdom that I learn in the stuff that I still got to deal with, that I think if younger folk can start to do it now and earlier, you don't need to get to where my generation get to. So, if I ever start anywhere on the book, I simply start on that page where, here's your commitment. If you want to start transitioning, is what is your will to change? What's your ability to adjust and adapt? And if you are like a tree that's rigid in the wind, you're going to be hitting winds on this transitional journey. And if you are not flexible, if you can't adjust and adapt, it's going to blow you over. And part of the first beginning is, and I say to the guys, what are you prepared to do? And we'll form a pull through. So there's a lot of, Patrick, you've talked about the simple body-based modalities, breathing techniques, techniques that come which work on energy centers of the body, whether it's Tai Chi or Qigong type movements or whatever it is, but they're body-based. It's about getting up every day and finding 20 minutes of what you're prepared to do. Get on the ground and do it. Do your breathing, do some stretches, make your bed. Do that. We don't even go near the challenges of transitioning. We first of all just get people in the front seat of their vehicles. The minute people do that, you're not lost. The minute people also learn to find tribe, there's a great group here, start reaching out, asking for help. And we know that, it's like Maslow's hierarchy. When the spirit and the soul is tired and hungry, it's not ready to hear the complex issues that you carry. It needs to feel safe. And we can only really feel safe when we are safe within our bodies, because we know what to do to keep our bodies clean and at ease to manage the demands of what's happening around us. We're located in tribes, so we now feel protected. And we have a mission, so we have purpose. At that point, we're ready to do the more complex stuff. Rather than start with the complex stuff, it's like trying to get somebody going on a run when they haven't eaten for 3 days. But yet, the problem with people stuck in transitioning process where they're complex issues is that we first go, well, let's talk about the most difficult part and let's heal that. It's not. It's about, let's rather work on make your bed. Do 5 or 10 or 15 minutes every day. And I work with the guys on it. Text me every time you do it. But let's get you back in the front seat. I think so many people in the transitioning process are caught in the back seat of their vehicle. And there's nothing worse than going through a sandstorm when you're not even driving your own vehicle. And if we equate the sandstorm to the howls and the creaks and the groans of in transitioning what we've left behind, what we've lost, that's the sandstorm. But we have to be ready for it. We have to at least know how to drive through it. And so the core thing of the book is that it equips you with tools to learn to drive through that sandstorm. The challenge to change and adjust and adapt, and the R, which is, what is your responsibility yourself like? Well, when I was writing the book is kind of version 3. There was a little book initially called Which Way is Your Claymore Facing that people could stick in their back pockets, and I took that off eventually. Then I did a PDF with more of my life story, and I handed that out to my kids and family members. But then eventually one day, it was like I didn't want to write anymore. I got tired of writing. And I had this calling to actually write, and I started rewriting the book. And it was just going to be operational strategies and tools. But as I was writing the book, it was like the book started writing me. And it turned into a journal. I had no thoughts or ideas about writing a journal. But when I reflect back now, I realized there was a gift that was given to me, because the journaling is the effort we prepare to put into our journey. If you're just going to read a book and think you're going to do it, it's like you read a book on parenting and now you're ready for parenting. No, you're not. You learn about parenting in the sleepless nights and the colic and the croup and the exhaustion and the joy. But you have to put the effort. You've got to put the sweat in. And the book is, if you really want to, whether you use the book or not, you need to find in what way are you prepared to start putting effort into your journey. Effort by finding your pull-throughs, doing them every day, but also journaling for those that value that. And the vision behind it was that this book, as it is on its own, is my book. The minute you pick it up, it becomes your book. The minute you start writing in it, you become the author of a new book. And that's the book that you share with your family. So my book becomes your book, becomes our book. And then as we share the stories of the book, it becomes the tribe's book. And anyone who's written a book that can promote healing, that's the goal, where the book becomes yours, ours, tribes. It connects us all together. But we have to be willing. If we're transitioning, and it was like running an ultramarathon, we need to know and we need to be ready for those moments where we feel lost. And we've all felt lost. Who are we when we leave a tribe we belong to? Who was I? Well, I didn't even know I was a veteran. I mean, that's how bizarre it was in the 70s. You just kind of left. I don't even know how my mind worked, but it was like it happened and it was gone, but it wasn't gone. But I see now, and as I've worked with guys a lot, is that tribe is so important to them. And, we've talked about how there's tribe and then there's what happens up here, where it's political and promotional, and the values are very different. And where those values conflict with the core values of the ground, which is belonging, and you are prepared to put your life on the line for another, there's your moral injury, where you feel that your organization actually becomes the enemy. And unfortunately, there's quite a lot happening within the military and I think hearing within first responders as well, where the enemy is no longer what's happening on the streets or in the war. It's what you're surrounded by within your own tribe. And that moral injury is powerful and painful. And so when we leave that, it almost starts to strip us away. It wears away the parts of who we are. It wears away our sense of competency and our sense of self-esteem and self-worth. And so it's no longer even just going back to rescue yourself. It's almost having to reintegrate yourself and find the parts that have been taken, and starting to find your sense of worth, not even belonging, but I have a right to be who I am. I have a right to stand strong inside myself. So these are some of the complex issues that I find the guys are struggling with. I did have an experience in Australia. We march. There's a march called on Anzac Day, and all the veterans from the World War II who now in jeeps on wheelchairs to current, and my tribe, the Rhodesians, are also allowed to march in that. And I remember standing there, and we had some of our SAS guys, our reconnaissance, and our commandos. And they were doing a lot of cross-border stuff and some really, jumping into contacts from choppers at 500 feet, literally 4 or 5 times a day. These guys were having contacts. They were doing extraordinary things. And I remember feeling this deepest sense of I don't belong here. I haven't earned the right. And what I sat with in reflection was shame, not feeling good enough. And slowly, as I sat with people transitioning, I'd say to them, how do you feel about your medals or marching at commemorative ceremonies? And I'd watch their eyes flicker, because I know the one thing we don't like talking about is that sense of shame. And I realized that unless we address that, it doesn't matter what we do in the transitioning process. As long as there's shame, we're not good enough. And no one's going to give us our power back. We have to be willing to understand that shame, face that shame, and then reclaim who we are. Because shame is the worst story. It's dead weight in a backpack. It's the product of what was inflicted on us in the past. It's not real, because who we are still, each one of us is a proud, strong human being. But when parts of us are stripped away because of vulnerability and disempowerment, how we build that up is not easy. And I know that it took somebody to say to me, the very fact that when you put on uniform, you've earned the right to stand tall. And for me to realize that, yep, we were 4 guys on operations, 7 to 10 days in extremely dangerous territory, but I wasn't jumping out of choppers and I wasn't on deep reconnaissance stuff, but I have a right to stand tall. But I can tell you now that that little thing is still flickering on the edges somewhere. I can still feel it. It's the imposter syndrome. And these are the things that we don't like to talk about. But I think until we map this territory out well, our compass and our ability to navigate through from leaving the military or first responders, the police or whatever it is, and embracing who we are in the present, there's weight that stops us moving forward effectively. But even the understanding in the process, as we map this transitioning process up, when we know that somewhere on the map, there's this territory called shame, there's this territory called loss and grief, and we know all the components, just knowing it, there's an awakening and the beginning of a healing, because we go, so I'm not the only one feeling the sense of I'm not good enough. So part of, I think, what I want to look at as we move forward is really mapping out this journey, and not just mapping it out in terms of our book, but it's mapping it out in terms of the contribution that everybody can offer as we form a conversation. Because the collective conversations we have amongst each other helps reform a map that belongs to all of us. My book belongs to 22 years of sitting with veterans. It's not my book. It's a story that emerged between all of us. It's a vision of healing and understanding transitioning that we were all responsible for. I just simply put the words on the book. And I'm hoping that as we have these conversations, each of us has a part of the map. And in forming that map, we'll probably, and I hope, it'll add something to people reconnecting with themselves and becoming extraordinary and wise human beings in their present moment. So I've said a lot, probably too much. My wife told me, don't talk too much. So I'm going to stop, hold the wisdom. And yeah, again, what's coming up for people?
I apologize if some sound bled over.
No.
I clicked on something accidentally. Barry, I just thank you for this. I think it's profound and I think it's very helpful. And frankly, as you progress with this, I'm looking forward to hearing that, because it seems like the perfect narrative to accompany the book as you journey through the book. So thank you for that.
Okay. And I'll be guided. This is new for me. And talking about the book is new for me. And so, in terms of transitioning into what I want to do here, I'm finding it slowly as we all meet. Somehow I know this book is interwoven in the process, but I have a feeling that if this works and we start to grow and people feel that there is a home for them in this place where they don't feel threatened or they don't feel they need to talk or share, I often say to people, even if you're on, keep your camera off and the sound off, just be there. It's a safe place. There's no obligation to do anything. If we can collect a safe tribe where we can start to have these conversations that are both powerful, funny at times, and where people can share their hearts and other people can go, oh, I get it. Thank you. If we can do that, then I'm hoping between the leaving and the arriving, we can start to do things. And then in the arriving where we need to be, we haven't lost ourselves, but we're also ready to build a life worth living. I think that's kind of what really comes to me. So, this is the first one, and I think slowly it will form, and as it should, because it's organic. And I think it's going to be determined by the conversations we have and the directions that it'll go. The book is simply there as something we can reflect on. And if people choose to go through it and things come up through the book, I mean, some of the poems I know there in the letter from a veteran to his wife, those can evoke a lot of things. And where someone is willing to share their experiences from the book or what the book or life or their transitional challenges are brought up. I think, and I hope that it'll become a place of healing, as well as, as I believe I said, forming the map and orientating the compass, which is, why I called it, I think my wife got the word, navigate. Is we're learning here to navigate back, navigate forward. So that's the dream and that's the vision. And let's see what happens as, we're recording this, and hopefully when people do listen to it, it will create an invitation. So let's see. I've always said, if you want to change a forest, one leaf at a time, and I'm happy with one leaf at a time. Small things that slowly over time create big change. So yeah, that's about it from me for today. But I want to thank you guys. I mean, Robin, really, it's always good to see you, and Patrick and Sarah, your gift and your generosity to create places where people can belong is just profound. And I love what you're doing. And again, a massive thank you for your time. I'll keep doing my little videos. So the YouTube is on there. I'm having fun finding that. At first, I thought I was going to throw the computer out the window, but it's like I'm getting there. I'm
I just
getting
want to
there. So,
I
yeah.
want to thank you, Barry. I really want to thank you. I can't tell you how excited I am about this, because I have heard so many stories over the years, and I'm always listening to podcasts. I'm always trying to learn, to be better equipped. And what I love about what you're doing is you're just so potent. You just nail the real issues that I keep seeing and hearing the patterns of, and you just nail it with this great language, this clear language, using, I guess, the term culturally competent language of our warriors' experiences. So it's such an honor. And it really is. It's such an honor to be able to have your voice there helping people navigate. So I'm thrilled. And I just want to thank you so much, Barry.
No, well, thank you. And thanks, guys. I will be on again next week. I also want to say, Sarah, we need to be careful with time change as well. So your change of time um, will impact on my time. So I'll need to adjust to fit with you guys. And sometimes there can be a difference where I could be at 1000 and then one day be at 1200 within a few months. So there's quite radical changes. So when your time changes come, please let me know.
Okay.
Okay. So otherwise I'll get up and it would have happened. Everybody would have been waiting. Right.
Right.
And it's the same when we adjust time. So we're looking at different time zones happening between us all, and we just need to adjust to those as they happen to get it right.
Very good. And okay, so we have a few months.
Yeah,
That's
we do.
at least on our end. So that's good. That's a good reminder.
As long as I don't have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, that's the
Oh,
only
God.
change.
It's crazy. It's so wonderful we have a chance to do this, but it is funny trying to navigate the times sometimes. It's just hilarious. You and I have gone through that.
Yeah, we have. Yeah. All right. So thanks, everybody. Robin, I hope you're well, and always good to see you. It really is. And thank you for coming on.
Thank you.